Hello, 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 everybody. How are you? I'm Josie Caballero, and this is Luxander, and we are here today on the Lines Transatlantic Call-In Show. Hope everybody's doing well. How are you today, Lux?
I'm doing pretty well. I went to the garden plot and I got some fresh basil, so I'm gonna make like basil chicken tonight with fresh basil, and I'm very excited. I said that both ways so that nobody can be mad at me uh, across the pond and close to home. So yeah, how are you doing today, Josie?
Doing good. Now they're just gonna be mad at both ways. You think they're
Yep,
gonna make them happy both ways, but now you're just made them mad both ways. It always
yep.
works that way.
Inconsistency. Yep, always
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah, I have been working. As everybody here knows, I work in elections and politics and voting, and I'm getting ready to go to the DNC convention in 2 weeks. So that's been wild. I literally had an hour worth of time dispersed on my calendar of just like breathing time.
Oh
Everything
no.
else has been meetings. Everything else
Oh
has been
geez.
nothing but wall to wall meetings. But I got to share a story because this is a really cute story and it makes the work worth it. So I am finishing up one of the calls, and it's literally one of those spots where I don't have a meeting. And this person calls on my work phone, and it's like, my work number is connected to my phone. And this person's like, "Hi." I'm like, "Hi." And I was like, "How can I help you?" And she was like, "I just want to talk to another trans person." And
No.
I was like, "Oh my god!" And she was like, I was like, "Well, I am a trans woman," and she's like, "Oh, good, I'm a trans girl," and I'm like, "Oh, great, how did you get this number?" And she was
Hmm.
like, "Oh, this number was on the back of a P flag pamphlet that I got my psychologist office." So she just
Oh,
like called
okay.
my org because my org's number was on there, but my org's number is not. It's a policy organization, right? It's an organization. It's not like a direct services org. So she just randomly just dialed a number on that, like on the little voice recorder things, like
Mhm.
dialed for whoever you're trying to talk to. She was just like beep beep beep, and it popped up to be me, and I
I mean,
just
I guess it
like
worked.
it worked, but yeah, I get those calls every now and then, and just trying to connect this person to like local resources, like trying to figure out like if there's a local LGBTQ center. But it was somebody that was like going into high school, and they didn't even have access to like YouTube or anything.
Oh
They
my
were just
gosh.
like I just had this like image of them like sitting in the corner of the room calling some random national organization being like, I just need to connect with another person in my life
That's
right
wild.
now. But it was like a quick 15-minute call. I gave her some resources that were local in the area, and hopefully she'll find a GSA when she gets to high school and all of that type of stuff. But it was like one of those moments where it was just like with all of the chaos and all of the work and like me just like in a beehive of just doing all the things, like that human moment, like just to
Mhm.
break the monotony and just like have a human moment with somebody who is just like legitimately like at a moment of crisis. Like if I need to talk to another trans human right now to make sure I'm
Yeah.
not alone, was makes it all worth it. It's that human moment I need when I'm just like dealing with like elections and politics and politicians and influencers and all of these people. It's like, no, there is a person in this country that reached out for help and I was on the other line. How fucking cool is that?
It's
Right?
really
Like,
sweet. It's really sweet and really sad both. Like, but it's
it,
like,
it
yeah,
really it
it makes the work worth it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it was like one of those moments that it was just like, oh, it like connected me. I was like, oh, I was like, "You know what? Thank you. Thank you for calling. I really appreciate that." So me doing real life call-in shows in the real world, touching
Yeah.
grass and doing call-ins. So what let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Mentorship.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you want to get your super chats in, $5 or more, and we'll read them at the end of the show. So let's go ahead and get started and go into our poll from last week.
And don't forget to hit the like button.
Oh yeah, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. You better do
Ah,
that. Better do that now. Um, is the Republican obsession with trans people weird? 91% says absolutely, and then 9% said no. Well, I think
unsurprising.
that the yeses have it.
Yeah. I didn't look in the I didn't really look in the comments of this one to see what the no's were like. I'm kind of curious. Like,
Yeah,
okay, there are 1,000 comments on it, but yeah, I think it's mostly like people, mostly just people agreeing. Like, yeah, it's weird because this is like, I guess it was actually Tim Walz who was one of the people popularizing this whole thing of calling the Republicans weird, and they hate
yeah.
it. Like, have you
They hate
noticed
it
that,
so
Josie? It's my
much.
favorite.
Yeah, I love it. And you know what I was saying the other day? I was like, you know what? They just need to go ahead and upgrade it to creepy too. And Tim Walz said creepy, and I was like, yes, you said it. You said the words.
It's accurate, it's true, and they are really upset by it. You know, they're upset by it in a way that they're not upset by being called like bigoted or fascist or anything. They can like semantically wiggle out of those and they
Yeah,
can argue, but you know, weird is vibes only. And I
yeah,
love it. Yeah. Fascists want to
yeah.
position themselves as normal and like that's what you want to aspire to be. But if we socially ostracize them, haha, you can't position
Ah,
yourself as normal anymore.
nope. Oh, it's so good. It's like sticking to the Teflon. It's so good for them. Oh my god, it's so
hmm
good for us, but it's also really good to see it just stick and just like ruin their whole everything. Like today, Trump put out a video basically saying what they're doing to Biden is wrong. That's so
hmm
unconstitutional. It's not fair. It's like, dude, just cry more that it's not Biden. Like, come on. Like, it's so sad. It's so funny and
They've
weird.
spent so much money, like, on all this campaign stuff.
Yeah,
Like, how much Let's Go Brandon merchandise is sitting in a warehouse somewhere now?
I
Hilarious.
know. It's
They
so
don't know what
good.
to do with Kamala.
No, they don't. Or Walls. Walls is even worse. Walls is even scarier for them. It's like
Yeah.
haunting their dreams. I love
Speaking
it.
of this week's poll, Tim Walz, we have a
Oh
question about
yes.
him. We want to know what you all think about, will Tim Walz push Kamala further to the left on trans rights? So the reason that we're asking is because I feel that the Biden administration has been a little bit slow on these things. Not that they're anti-trans or anything, but that it's like slower than I would like for it to be. However, um, in the state of Minnesota, they have established trans sanctuary laws, um, other body autonomy stuff like preserving the right to abortion in their legislation. And Tim Walz is like behind all of these efforts. And they also just removed the gay and trans panic defense for murder cases.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so excited about him. He seems so cool, like so normal by comparison to the weird people.
Yeah, and the lieutenant governor of Minnesota is like has a picture of saying protect trans kids, and it's got like a Bowie knife like in between the
And a
protect
rose.
and
Let's not
trans
forget the
and
rose.
a rose and a rose. It was a great shirt, and that
hmm
person's gonna be so it's like and also Tim Walz is from Nebraska,
hmm
and Tim Walz was in Nebraska giving praise to Senator Kavanaugh there, who did the filibuster that's
Oh
protected trans
yeah.
kids as well.
hmm
So he was even open to like, hey, this is really great that Nebraska was able to hold the line with the really badass filibuster. I know
hmm
Senator Kavanaugh because I actually gave her an award one time. It's like one of those like really nice little glass awards. It's like and like I was able to give that to her. It was so great.
That's cool.
But yeah, it was super cool to know all that stuff. So it's super great. Anyways, it's exciting. I like Tim Walz says, let's bring the joy back into politics.
Yes, they both do have the charisma. They're making jokes, they're laughing, and I think
Yeah.
that that's so refreshing. It's something we really need. I understand politics is a very serious situation. Obviously, it's serious, difficult work. I'm sure you know much better than I do, like how much effort goes into it. But you need that levity. Otherwise, it's just doom, doom, doom all the time. So I'm
Yeah,
excited for
I
the first
know.
time in
Think
forever.
about how
I'm
we
excited.
think about how we were 5 weeks ago compared to now.
I
Like,
know.
it's just like I don't it's like the dark times.
Yeah. It was like, yeah, Trump presidency number 2 looming on the horizon, and now I feel pretty confident that he's going to lose, which feels great.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's get in the calls. And if you want to call, make sure you call in at the bottom of the screen at 720-619-2288. And if you like to join on the web link description, we are there too. And thank you for our call screener for making sure how to do. Making sure we get great people on the line. So, Lux, you peeked at the line list. Where do you want to go first?
I think we were gonna start with Rogue Show, who is a regular caller on all of the different shows on the line. Give him a chance to
Okay.
chit-chat with us for a bit.
Hey, Rogue Show from South Carolina. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you, Josie? How are you, Luxander?
So
Doing
good.
great.
Um, I do, I do want to give my piece on the previous poll real quick and say I only voted no because of how normal or just how normally it occurs. It's still wrong and shitty for Republicans to be obsessing over trans people, but it it's gone it's happened so much that it's not even weird, which is sad.
Ah, it's normalized. Yeah,
Like,
I
it's
hear what you're
common.
saying.
Yeah. I feel like there's a little bit of a difference between common and normal, but it's fine. I'm so fascinated, with your question, though. Lay it on us for today.
Yeah. So I'm an aspiring star writer. I'm not going to go into what what I'm writing because I don't want to promote on this channel.
Rogue Show,
But
can you put the mic closer to your mouth? It's kind of hard to hear you. You sound a little echoey.
actually, let me get a less echoey room. Is it this
That'd be
better?
helpful. Yes, much better. Thank you.
Um, I just, or as trans people yourselves, um, I would like to get some insight on how to represent trans people in story writing.
Mhm. I think
Yeah.
there are some pretty clear, like, no's that we could both give more than yeses, because like, every character is gonna be different, just like every person is different. So the question is just, like, how do you write trans people in a story? Um, I mean, I think one of the most important things is that you don't want to have the entire storyline for that person is about them being trans. I think a lot of trans people are kind of tired of that sort of representation. Just like a similar thing with gay people, where it's like the
Mhm.
entire thing is about them coming out and all the struggle that they're going through. Um, yeah, like, give the trans characters an arc that has something else going on. Not that they can't experience hardship, but that there are more layers to a person than just their superficial attributes. I don't know. I'm really interested in storytelling, though. What do you think, Josie?
Yeah, I think I always like it when being trans is just an interesting fact about a character. Like I think
Mhm.
about in Alien, right? Like people don't know in Alien the main character is actually trans, right? It's actually in the like subtext of like the computer screen. It's like person is actually trans in the like, and you have to like read into it. It's like, oh crap, she was so awesome and she was trans. That's really
Mhm.
great. So there's a lot of things, right? Like when I think of like the have you seen the Netflix cartoon adaptation of She-Ra? Have you seen that, Rogue Show?
Yeah. I actually didn't quite, I didn't quite enjoy it because it seemed,
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Sure. It's not for everybody, but there is a trans
Yeah.
character in that show, and it's actually one of the princesses Perfuma. But the writers of the show was like, when would we out her as trans? Because the world that they live in was so accepting that there was no reason to ever introduce her being trans as a problem, right? So it kind of went away from the wayside, and they didn't even bring it up, right? But the character models were written as a trans woman. The background of the character was a trans woman, and they just didn't have an opportunity to do a flashback or anything, and so it never came up, right? So when you think about like character development, like in real life, like when does trans come up, right? For me, in my real life, trans comes up a lot. I'm on the Transatlantic Call-In show. I work in a trans organization. Like, and if you were to look at like my story arc as Josie, being trans is a pretty key part, and it's pretty hard to hide because of the things that I do as a person, right? If you think about real life representation of trans people, right? So like part of my life and part of my inspiration comes from my transness in a lot of ways, but it's a thing about me around the work that I do in politics, right? As a character. And boy, man, I sure am making myself sound like main character syndrome hardcore right now. But I'm just trying to give an example how in real life my transness comes up more often than somebody else who is trans in real life. I know a lot of trans people who it rarely ever comes up because the circles that they run with already know and nobody cares. Right. So there's like that type of stuff. I know I just threw a ton of stuff. I don't know what your thoughts are, Rocho, or Lux wants to add more.
Do you want to add more, Lux?
I would say like have a sensitivity reader. Like maybe a couple sensitivity readers. Like this is not fiction, but there was a recent video on the SciShow channel, which I generally trust very much, that did a video about hormone therapy for trans people. And there was a lot of misinformation in there, partially because the script was written by a trans man. So a lot of the information about trans feminine HRT was not accurate. So like it can help to have sensitivity readers of like multiple different varieties to contribute, like to help you kind of hone in on that character. And they can tell you like, you know, this part seems a little bit egregious, or this part seems like it's really good. And they're all going to have different opinions, right? So you kind of like aggregate those different views. And, you know, yeah, like consuming media with trans people in it. And maybe even finding trans authors and reading their stories. Like a friend of mine writes novels, like vampire novels. And yeah, it could be good to just get like a lot of different perspectives, both through reading on your own and through like offering to pay someone $20 to read your script and kind of see if they can hammer out any wrinkles in it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Josie?
No, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. What thoughts?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, for sure. Characters are complex, right? And a good character has a lot of struggles and things in their backstory that sometimes come up early in the conversation, some come up later in the conversation, right? You can have dramatic story notes with it. Just don't make us a trope.
Yeah, try to
right?
avoid
Like,
stereotypes and tropes for sure.
yeah, right. Because I think that is the most problematic thing is if we're like like a psychopath killer that is trying to get into women's spaces as a trans person. Stay away from things like that, right? That's already been
Yeah.
overplayed. It's been plot. You know, also like, you know, there's a lot of stories that have coming out things like that. But unless you're trans yourself, you probably want to stay away from that territory, right? Because like, for example, the movie I Saw the TV Glow is like a coming out story, but it's not your typical coming out story because it came from the eyes of a trans person, so it came out really, really good,
I still need to
right?
catch that one.
I know, right? It came out really, really good, and it had nothing to do with the actual character coming out as trans, but it still came out so good as a coming out type of story for people who are queer and trans. So there's like, I would think about in those contexts of trying to be like, make it an interesting fact about your character and don't make it just about it.
Yeah. I I did kind of want to touch a bit on that the She-Ra decision, and
Sure.
I think they should have just went for that character coming out, because
Yeah.
we know that people can be trans even without intolerance.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really good criticism, and it was definitely, I think, a hard decision on the creators, because I've heard the creators talk about it, and they just like the
Yeah.
way the story was written. They just realized like they didn't really do flashbacks, right? So they in the whole
Mhm.
show, it just wasn't part of the story arcs, right? So in the only time they did it was, I guess, for the main characters. So for the way they were looking at it is, it just never organically came up. And I think what I love about that is that because it never organically came up, it never felt forced, because it never was, right? Because if it was like
Yeah.
just slotted in and forced into a story arc all of a sudden, people would have been annoyed by that too, right? So, but yes, you're right. I do like explicit representation, right?
Yeah,
But in that universe, how does it work? Mhm.
I'm sorry, I keep trying to overtalk. That's rude of me.
No, you're doing fine.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a story. It doesn't have to be a story arc. It can just be like a one and done thing, like the Victor from Umbrella Academy.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I think they did a
So
good
I
job
thought,
there, but I think the reason that comes up though is because they come out as trans in the story that they were telling in the present moment. So it made sense
yeah,
to put it there, right? When you already have a
Mhm.
character who's been trans their whole life, like, and everybody already knows, nobody cares.
Yeah, true. Like, it's unremarkable.
Sorry, I do have one more question, and it's
Sure.
be a little more specific. How about trans villain?
Trans
Yeah.
villains. Yeah. Wasn't
Yeah,
there one in one of the new Star Treks? I am, so behind on the Star Treks, but
I
I think there
think I
was.
think I think there was. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
again, like a trans villain, like, just try to stay away from like the tropes. Like, what is it, him in Powerpuff Girls? Right?
Yeah. I
Like
love him,
that
though.
character. I know, I do love him. I do. But I think trans villains are also good, right? I think it's just an
Mhm.
interesting thing that you can do, right? That it, again,
Yeah,
what I would say is write your character, right? Write your character, write the story, and then have trans people in your life proofread it for you. And just
all
be
right.
like, "Hey, I tried my best." And the trans person is gonna be like, I liked it, but you maybe could have done this," and try to get different perspectives, right? From people who are different
Yeah,
walks of life, right? Just be like, "What do you
Mhm.
think of this character?" Right? And I think
Yeah,
that that is something that you can absolutely do, because trans people can be portrayed in all types of caricatures, and I think that a trans villain is great. Like, I know Cruella isn't trans, but damn, I like
yeah,
relate to her story so hard. Like for me, I feel like Cruella is kind of like a trans allegory in a way, because of her having to like go and revert to the Cruella part of herself, and like her giving that speech about who she is. Like, that was such a
yeah.
tearjerker for me, and so I think there's a lot of value. It's just good writing. It's good writing.
Um, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking my call. And Luxander, I hope to be talking to you about story writing in the future, because I never knew that. I never knew we were both story talking to people.
Yeah, I'm thinking about doing video essays on my own channel. So, like, yeah, if you're into it, there might be more content from me on the media analysis train. So, yeah, thank you for your call so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.
And I am a consumer
Yeah.
of stories.
Yeah.
I will eat them all up. Great. Before we get into the next call, I just want to also mention the people because I am promoting something as well. And promoting the trans call for Harris that is happening. So that will be probably shared by me in the links at some point. So if you see the link pop up, and if you see the link pop up from one of my colleagues that I work with, let them link, okay? Because they're awesome and I love them. So that's what I wanted to say there. Awesome, great. So we'll go ahead and take the next call, and let's go ahead and take Giddy from Utah. Hi, Giddy.
Hello.
How are you?
Good so far.
Good.
Well, that's good. That's
So
always
what
a
would
good
you like
start.
to? It's always good to be good so far. Hopefully, we can keep the good going. So yeah, what would you like to talk to us about today?
So I have a question about transgender that's such a hard word. Comorbidities. Don't know.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'll ask the question first, and then I'll just quickly give a brief reason why I'm asking. So what I have written down for the question is, is it true that transgender people have a higher likelihood of psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia and OCD? Because I understand that many of the comorbidities, such as depression and anxiety, they make intuitive sense to me, but others that I've read online don't. And the reason for the call is that I have ADHD, and so I understand the comorbidities. I'm getting better at that word. I understand the comorbidities of that condition, but so I can see how things correlate. But from what I've learned of the transgender experience, I don't see how that there is a correlation between that mindset and a higher likelihood of schizophrenia, as in comparison to ADHD and autism, which are co-occurring a lot of times.
Yeah, well, your instincts are right. There aren't really no studies or any type of links that focus on trans people and such psychological disorders as schizophrenia or OCD. There have been some loose, studies about like autism and ADHD, but nothing has been confirmed. A lot of it is anecdotal. So there hasn't really been any clinical studies on this app just yet, because it is difficult to just survey large trans populations and also getting that verified psychological verifications of like the people who have these type of things. A lot of times these are self-reports when you do these surveys, so it's really, really hard to figure out how many people are diagnosed versus the people who self-report that they may have ADHD or autism, for example, is the one that's mostly talked about. So yeah, it's and a lot of times I think that and this is something that we've seen in the research that has been done on trans people, that gender dysphoria can sometimes mask itself as something different, right? So sometimes somebody can have gender dysphoria very severely and people think, oh, you just have depression, right? That's very, very common, right? And then when people take their gender affirming care, all of a sudden their gender dysphoria disappears, but their depression symptoms do too. But they weren't really depression; it was really gender dysphoria, because the human mind and the psyche is incredibly complex, right? Like, this is why we have entire fields of medicine and mental health, because it's really hard to just like put your finger on like, oh, it's this thing versus this thing, and it's this thing versus this thing, and it could be other things mingling with other things that makes it incredibly difficult, because the human mind is incredibly complex. So yeah, there's really no confirmation that says that trans people have more psychological disorders such as schizophrenia, OCD. I don't know, Lex, unless you've read something recently.
I just did a quick little Google and I found one article from the NCBI website, or like the NIH website, that says basically that there is a slightly higher, like, okay, the prevalence of these two disorders means that there is going to be some percentage of overlap, like naturally, and that apparently the prevalence of the comorbidity is slightly higher than you would expect statistically. And they have some hypotheses in this about that, basically that like both disorders, like if you want to call gender dysphoria a disorder, I think it technically was considered such until pretty recently, but like both phenomenon are potentially rooted in like prenatal brain development. But my personal opinion here is that there's some amount of selection bias. Like, people with gender dysphoria spend more time in a therapist's office than people who don't. Similarly, people with schizophrenia spend more time in a therapist's office than most people. So the likelihood of finding other illnesses is higher than most people. Like, there might be more gender dysphoria than we know because people aren't in therapy, working with someone to figure that out. There might also be more schizophrenia than we know about for the same reason. Maybe just like people who are higher functioning, I guess you could say. So I completely understand what you're saying, that like it does make perfect sense that there are comorbidities with anxiety and depression, because that is like directly correlated with the way that trans people are treated. When trans people are treated better, those other comorbid issues tend to go away. But yeah, I think that it is pretty easily explained. And like with OCD as well, like any serious disorder beyond the expected, like, yeah, you feel depressed when your family rejects you kind of stuff. I think that we're mostly looking at a selection bias. Although it is of course interesting to study. And like, yeah, if we could get broader looks at like a broader population, instead of having the selection bias of only people who are already in therapist's office, obviously that's difficult. I considered going into sociology, but the fact that you have to do a ton of research like this really put me off. Like, oh, you mean I have to talk to people? It sounds terrible. But yeah, so I don't know if that kind of helps clarify anything for you, Giddy.
No, it kind of made. Yes, it did, but it just also brings up more questions. But I'll rack over them for a bit.
Yeah,
Sure.
no, thank you for that. Thank you for asking that question, because I think it does get misconstrued a lot, and it can't be overstated what Lux said about the fact that trans people do seek a lot of mental support, because sometimes we have to, just to get our surgeries, or our gender affirming
Yeah.
care.
Like
So we
required 6
are.
months of therapy. Yeah. Who else has to do required 6 months of therapy before they get treatment? Mm?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just an over selection bias.
Hmm. Hmm. I am. I'm satisfied with the answer, but I also want more. So,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, do more research, and if you find any answers, then feel free to call us back. I'm going to be on again a couple more times this month, so I'm certainly happy to continue the conversation. Maybe it is somewhat unsatisfying, the idea that it's merely a selection bias, because I think the brain is fascinating. I think neurobiology
Yeah.
is fascinating, and there maybe are more in-depth underlying answers. It's just really hard to study the brains of living people because they're using them. It's just kind of tough.
Yeah.
In that case, if I may ask one more quick question,
Yeah, go
hopefully.
ahead. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so I've
A little bit. It is the same. Basically, there is a slightly higher incidence, apparently, in transgender people, obviously, who have been in therapy and stuff. Again, this could be a selection bias. My personal opinion is that autistic people don't care about gender norms. I've never been diagnosed or anything, but I very obviously am autistic and ADHD. So I just feel like rules that aren't, if there's not a good reason for the rule, then I don't give a shit about it. So when you get into like, you're supposed to act this way, or like you're expected to do this, I'm like, okay, but is there a good reason? And if not, like, I'm going to break that rule because I don't care. If there's a good rule that has a good reason, I will follow that rule, even if other people find it annoying. But yeah, like, I think that could be part of it if we're digging for reasons why, because there does seem statistically to be a slightly higher prevalence of autism within the trans population. And yeah, that's my speculative reason as to why.
Yeah.
Okay,
I tend to agree. Go ahead, Katy.
Okay, well, yeah, you're Luxander. You're selling me on this autism thing. That sounds awesome to not care about rules.
I mean,
yeah.
If the shoe
Story
fits,
of my life in the Navy. The Navy was not a good fit for me. It's like, why do I have to fix the bed all the time?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Well, good. Yeah, I think I'm autistic now, and if you keep it up, I'll go try being trans.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
just cracking eggs
give it
left and right.
Let's try. Thank you, Kitty. I appreciate you.
All right. Yep, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Later. Oh, that's fun.
Great. Yeah, that was good. All right.
Remember, everyone in the chat, to hit the like button. I'm not seeing enough likes on this video. There's almost 300 people here. Ooh. Hit the like button. It immediately helps the show. We appreciate it.
Hit the like button.
$5 super chats. We'll read them out at the end too. Don't forget.
I know. Super important. So Lex, how about Matt from Australia?
Ooh, yes, that sounds fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, Matt. How are you?
Hey, good.
Yeah. So you have a question about how do you know what gender you are? Let's discuss. What's up?
So I called last week, and I think my question was misunderstood.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know how do you know? That's the basic question.
How do you know? Oof, the question. Alexa, you want to go first? I can go first.
Sure. Yeah. I personally, as a non-binary person, I recommend shifting the focus off of trying to find your magical label. I always kind of recommend that people just try different kinds of expression and see what vibes. There's the classic, give the Starbucks barista a different name and have them call out your name and see how you feel when they call it out. Or try wearing different clothes or something, because at the end of the day, the label is kind of just a useful way to communicate what you're going through. Like, I know a ton of people who call themselves trans women in public, and then when you get to know them a little bit better, it turns out that they're actually non-binary. But for the purposes of kind of just existing in society, it's a little bit easier to say that they're trans women. And like for a long time I identified as genderqueer, but I just found it easier to say I was non-binary because I felt like the particular label didn't really matter. And now it turns out that I'm basically agender, but I still just say I'm non-binary, or even I'm just trans, depending on the context and like how relevant it is. So yeah, I would say, when you start to identify the areas where you have dysphoria and the areas where you have euphoria. Like if you're realizing that your beard makes you feel bad, and then you put on like fake nails and it makes you feel really good. Like those are some kind of indications, but you have to go searching. Like it's like a journey of finding yourself really. And you have to be really in tune with allowing yourself to want things. I think that's another big part that a lot of people are not necessarily, they don't think, well, just because I want to, that's not a good enough reason, I don't know, Josie, do you have
What do you
anything
mean?
to add?
Yeah.
Oh,
What do you
like,
mean
yeah,
about wanting things?
Yeah, so I mean, my perspective is that I grew up poor and I quashed in myself the desire to have anything. And so it has been something that I've had to cultivate in myself to be able to acknowledge, like, yeah, I do want that guitar, or I do want bottom surgery, even if it's something that I probably won't be able to realistically afford. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be like upset about it, but like the allowing myself to say, yeah, I want that was a process for me. And I think for a lot of trans people, especially if you are kind of dissociated a lot of the time, it can be hard to connect with yourself. And that, is not an experience that everybody has, but I think it's common enough that it's good to keep in mind that, yeah, you have to let yourself be like, man, yeah, I want to be a beautiful princess or whatever the thing is, even if it feels unattainable, even if it feels like it'll never happen. You have to let yourself want the thing.
I like that. That's beautiful. For me, it was a long journey. As many people know, I didn't come out till I was 34 years old, because I was raised in conservative Texas and I wasn't given the education to understand what I was feeling was normal. So I had a lot of shame involved because for a long time, as far as I can remember, when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a girl, and what that meant for me then was like I wanted what my sister had, right? I wanted what my female cousins had, and I liked the way that the adult women in my life lived their lives, and for me it was just like a thought of like, oh well, that's unobtainable. I have to live in this box that I was put in, so I tried my best to do that. And I played sports, I got really buff, and I joined the military, I did the whole thing, right, that a cis man is supposed to do, and it never made me happy. And then eventually I started to realize, well, I don't think I'm a guy, right? Like that's where it kind of all started, right? It all started with I don't think I'm a guy and I'd really prefer not to be, was kind of where my whole idea thought it was like. And then I started to like understand more and realize, and it was when I realized that, oh wait, like being a trans person is completely okay and normal and fine, was when I started to explore those feelings that made I never thought at 33 years old, the year before I came out, that I could be the woman that I am today. Right? It was just not even possible in my mind. I was like, nope, I'm going to be ugly. I'm not going to look good. My voice is going to be a dumpster fire. Like, I had all of the excuses. I'm too old. The medicine isn't going to take as well. Like, I had all of these excuses, but that's what they were. They were just excuses to block what I felt was unobtainable, when in reality, and I like the way Lux put it, which is I had to like give myself permission to want to be the pretty girl that I am. Right? Like I had to give myself permission to shave my legs. I had to give myself permission to like put on makeup and all of those things. And then it happened really quickly. My egg shattered, and I was like, I'm not a guy, and I need to figure out what's going on. And then I saw a gender therapist, and then we talked it through. And that gender therapist to this day never told me I was trans. I just sat and said, "Yeah, I'm trans. Probably this is probably what's going to happen." And I'm like, "Oh,
Probably.
explain that to me. Why do you feel that way?" And that's all it was. That's what my therapy appointments were. And so yeah, that's how I knew, because I started getting happier. I stopped being depressed. I started to thrive at the work that I do. Even though I was good at the work I did before, I was happier when I was doing my work now, and now I'm thriving and kicking ass, and I love it. Girl boss euphoria. That's the term we coined last show,
Yep.
and I'm gonna keep it. Girl boss euphoria is where it's at for me. But yeah, so that's how, and for me, my journey was binary, right? And for non-binary people, it's different, right? Some people will go the binary route and then realize, whoa, went too far, don't like this fem side either, and then take it back and then be non-binary like Lux and be like, whoa, this isn't right either, I'm just not a gender. And so it is a journey of discovery, but it all starts with, I'm not cis, right? And when you're able to say to yourself, I'm not cis, that's when the journey of who you are begins. At least that's what it was for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that has clarified anything for you?
Maybe I need to think about it more.
Yeah. The
Yeah, it's
unfortunate thing is
confusing.
that nobody can give you the answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Exactly. And honestly, and I'll tell you this, Matt, cis people that are people who are not trans don't wrestle with the question, am I the right gender? How do you know you're the right gender? Cis people are just that gender. They just are who they are, and that's how they kind of go through life. Just like a straight person. A straight person doesn't think about, oh, what is it like? Or maybe I want to be with somebody of the same, sexual orientation as me, right? Like that's not something that straight people do all the time. They're just straight, right? It's the same thing with cis people. They're just cis, and it's not something they think about a lot. And that helped me on my journey of like why I was obsessing about gender my whole life. I'm like, oh, it's probably because I'm not cis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah,
But I don't know.
yeah. I know, it's tough. Gender is weird in a good way. It is what it is. But yeah, anything else, Matt?
No.
Okay. All right.
Gonna have to sit on that one for a little longer. No
Yeah,
worries.
sit on that one. No, it's
Yeah.
okay. There's a lot of stewing that's involved. I get it. It's a lot to take in. It's definitely a lot to take in. But no, thank you for your curiosity in the call and talking that through with us.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, just
Okay.
a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
of
If you want to call
course,
back
of
in a
course.
couple weeks, we will be here to process more.
Yeah. Yes, always.
Yep,
We're always happy to do that. All right, Matt. Have a good day.
Yeah, okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Yep, thanks.
Bye.
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 I think Matt called last week. Right?
Yeah. They said up top that they had called last week. I missed it. I wasn't like ready
that's
for
right.
Matthew. So I wasn't like in the chat. The
No,
1 week that I wasn't here
no.
and Matthew called, I was like in the chat.
I know. No, Matt, I think called last week because we were talking about gender. Yeah, and they were like, yeah, okay. Yeah, and so there's a lot of processing, and I'm so happy that they are choosing our show to talk these things through, because I wish I knew this show was around when I was coming out. I don't think it was around when I was coming out. So I'm sure we're
It's a
very
journey.
helpful very helpful. Yes, absolutely. So we are going to take the calls that are on the line right now. We have 5 calls, so we are going to be taking you, but I'm going to ask if we can close the lines for the rest of the show. I do got to take another call after this. I apologize to everyone. Can't go on forever. But yes, but we'll go ahead and just go down the line as we have them. So
We
we'll
did get one
start
spicy
with
caller that just jumped in, so we might want to give
Oh,
that person some time. Like,
oh
I'm not
yeah,
saying right now,
let's
but
see.
like
No,
maybe
no,
make sure we get to them.
I think you're right. No, I see that. Let's see. I think we should start with Jacob, right? Is that who you're talking about?
Yep.
All right. So Jacob from Ohio, how are you? And do you
Hello, I'm doing
have a Yeah, so your statement is there should be no health care for trans children. So let's have the conversation. So
okay.
why shouldn't there be health care for trans children?
I just want to say thank you for letting me have this conversation. I appreciate you taking the call.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is some personal experience of mine, and we can get into that if we get into it. But to me, that time of life is for experimentation, right? That's the time that you experiment with new clothes, with makeup, or with makeup in both directions, right? I know. I'm 38. I've got a teen who's non-binary. They've got friends that are both sides of the transgender spectrum. Some of them use makeup to look like a boy. Some of them use makeup to look like a woman. And to me, that's the time for experimentation. That's when you experiment to see which one would fit. That's not the time to go all out medically and go put virtually put all your eggs in one basket and go that route.
Sure.
And
So Jacob, do you mind if I jump in really quick?
go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that this is a good conversation to start with here because I would say that everybody grows up in different speeds, right? Like some people are, really into something and then they different people come into different thoughts at a different points in time. And so what we try to look at here, right, is sometimes it's more than experimentation. For some people, it is experimentation, and people are living their lives. Like if they're non-binary, they're playing around with different expressions or anything like that, and that is just how they're living their lives. But for some people, it's not so much experimentation than an actual understanding, right? And so this is why I think the healthcare portion, like especially psychological, adolescence healthcare, is incredibly important because there's a lot of children and I would say minors that are young that are very clearly trans, right? And what I mean by that is there is observable, like, okay, this is what they prefer. They prefer to do dresses, dolls, whatever. And then at that point, you go and you get a medical evaluation from a pediatric psychologist. And that pediatric psychologist then observes that child for several years. Now, I'm talking about a kid that's like 6 years old, 7 years old, right? That the pediatric psychologist then observes that child to look for gender dysphoria. And what that gender dysphoria has to be is consistent, insistent, and persistent, meaning that they have to have those really rigid categories of them saying, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a boy, I'm a boy. Like that's just how the psychiatrist is connecting with that. And then after years of evaluation is when those conversations are being had with the doctor and the parent and the patient about trying to pause the puberty of that child. And pausing puberty is completely healthy. It's completely normal. It was created for cis kids that were starting puberty too soon. So many people have grown up, have children when they had puberty blockers and when they got off of them. And then after a few more years on puberty blockers, that's when the conversation with the doctor is being had about having the cross sex hormones, right? Where it's like, okay, the child, the doctor, and the family member is making the decision for the best interest of the patient to say, this is the puberty that they're going to go through, right? Is it going to be the puberty that is assigned at birth? Or is it the puberty that is natal, right? The way that they were born, right? So after all of that evaluation is before any type of medical interventions are typically done for the youngest of the trans kids. Most of the times for teenagers, though, by the time they're starting to understand, it takes about a year of evaluation and then they can start. But a lot of times they've already started puberty, and then you're more in that experimental phase. And sometimes it takes a little longer. And usually people either start at 16 or maybe 17 or possibly just wait until they're 18. So that's what the healthcare that I believe is necessary, because it's doctor prescribed and doctor evaluated. Does that make sense, Jacob? I'm sorry I kind of went on a long diatribe there, but I just wanted you to understand what trans healthcare is so we can start there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from my personal experience, I've had a few family members, that turned out to be gay, and when they were, 6, 7, and 8, they basically expressed as feminine for essentially up until 16, 17, and depending on the climate of the, I guess, the zeitgeist that's in the public persona, him just expressing himself in characteristically feminine ways could lead him to believe that, oh, I'm not really gay. I should be a woman because I'm expressing female characteristics. And I've also had experience. Sorry, go ahead. You want to add something?
But yeah. I just want to say there's a difference of expressing femininity versus saying I am a girl, right? So if you're the gay, family member, who is a boy, is expressing feminine characteristics, but never is outright saying, I'm a girl, I want to be a girl. Those things come naturally to the actual person if they're trans, right? Nobody is turned trans, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, we don't see a little boy who's into musical theater and say, we need to trans this one. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
No, but I've also seen two of my I call her, it's hard to not call her my daughter because she's been my daughter for so long, but I call her my daughter for the sake of getting confused right now. So my daughter's had two friends, and they've went from expressing themselves as trans to deciding that they're not trans in the span of 3 years. And somebody that was trans told me, well, they were never trans. And that kind of confused me because I thought the definition of trans was if you identify as the opposite sex. And that's what according to them, that's what they're experiencing for 3 years. And, and there's also the act of rebellion too. Kids rebel, right? So, just like rebellion's always been cool. So that's an avenue for kids to take in terms of a rebellion. I know it seems a little extreme, but rebellion is often extreme. And my main point is just that childhood is not really the time or the place to take those extreme measures. That would be in adulthood. We all know the cerebral cortex doesn't develop till you're 25. And it's also kind of flipping the whole notion of consent on its head. Typically throughout the entirety of society, we have let the adults consent. And now,
well, I want to jump in, Jacob. I'm sorry, you've put a lot out there, and I just want to make sure that we can address all of it so that we don't miss anything.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So children consent to medical procedures. It's kind of a required part of the process. like doctors confirm with the child, like, you know what's going to happen, right? And make sure that they know, like, minors can make the decision of like, yes, I did just blow out my knee in football practice and I'm going to get a surgery that has a much higher regret rate than any transgender procedure. So the consent thing, like, children are involved in the process of consent. An ear piercer won't pierce the ear of a child who is clearly not okay with it, even if the parent is dead set on getting the kid's ear pierced. Like, yes, for many major decisions, like signing a $100,000 loan for college and things like that, yeah, we do tend to wait until the age of majority, but overwhelmingly, for medical things, children are involved in the process. And I also want to kind of push back on this portrayal of seeking medical care as extreme. It's like, is therapy extreme? Like, if a kid feels that they have gender dysphoria, is taking them to a therapist extreme? Because that's a form of healthcare for trans youth. Is pausing puberty to give them more time to think about it extreme, knowing that that does not have any permanent effects on them? Even like it doesn't have any permanent effects on a precocious puberty cisgender kid. So why do we feel that that is an extreme measure when the point is to give them time to think about it?
Well, how long have puberty blockers been used for?
Since
Well, they've
like
been
the
used.
70s.
Yeah, so
Like
they've been used for
70s.
precocious puberty and trans kids since at least like the 70s and 80s. So both
Yeah.
for early puberty and for the purposes of like transition care, there's like at least 50 years of knowledge and data about that. And it basically is just like, yes, they shouldn't be on them indefinitely. We want to make sure that we use that. Let's just say 2 years is a good benchmark. We use that 2 years to let them experiment without all of the stress involved of their bodies changing in a way that they might not be okay with. Because let's be real, puberty and some of the effects of puberty are irreversible. So, you know, if there's concern about the irreversible impact of hormone treatment, then we have to acknowledge that there is a permanence to a lot of the things that you go through during your natal puberty. And the point of seeking this care at a younger age is to give them that extra couple of years of buffer without, like, it can be very intensely stressful to have your body changing in a way that you're not okay with. Like, I know that it's really hard to get as somebody who hasn't experienced that, but it's more than just being like, oh, I started my period and I don't like it. Like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty common experience, but the level of distress that some teens experience, it's like, they can't even functionally experiment if they're going through that. So the point of this healthcare is psychological evaluation, like Josie was saying earlier, and the pausing medication that gives them extra time to consider. And then, if it is true that they are insistent, consistent, and persistent since before puberty a lot of the time, then it's appropriate, I think, to allow them to transition into puberty at the same time as the rest of their peers. Like, I personally think it's uncool to make someone wait until they're 17 or 18 to start cross-sex hormones, because
Especially
by then, when they know, by then they've had like literally multiple doctors, endocrinologists, psychiatrists, like multiple professionals and parents. And in a lot of places, both parents have to sign off. Like, even in California, as of a few years ago, you needed both parents to sign off. So I'm just not really understanding what is so extreme about, you know, allowing young people to make decisions about their entire future. Like, when we're okay with them, like, again, joining the ROTC, which you can do at age 16 and 17, and then signing loans for college at 18. You know, what's the difference between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old functionally?
Well, you could get, I mean, you can get over the debt if you're, you know, and part of this is the detransitioners too, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
like
and
2% of trans people detransition. So like 2% of all the people who transition regret it and detransition. And then also, like, the majority of people who detransition do it because of social stigma, and they retransition later when they're in an affirming environment. So there's like 10
Yeah.
detransitioners going across the country making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And it's
Yeah.
not very honest.
So
I've
Jacob,
got-
like I get what you're saying. And first, I just want to say it, just to put a point on this piece, is like, this is all doctor prescribed healthcare, right? That's one thing, right? This is doctor prescribed healthcare that parents are consenting to, that the child or minor is consenting to at this point. And so before we jump on the detransitioners, because I definitely have a lot to say about that, do you agree that when a doctor, and all of the things that we talked about, like the psychological evaluation over time, the years of time that it takes, the amount of the amount of doctor support is necessary, the consent of the parents and the consent of the minor to do these procedures, do you think that that's reasonable?
I believe that ultimately the pharmaceutical industry, when you're talking about stuff like this, is driven by money.
But this isn't pharmaceuticals we're talking about. We're talking about your family doctor, right? We're talking about the doctor that you have trusted, that you are going to, that you has been with you for years, every step of the way. I'm not talking about going to big pharma to get your medicine. I'm talking about a doctor with the prescription book that you've trusted for your life, for your family. Like at that point, it's like, if you don't trust any doctors, then right, so you don't go to doctors because they have they prescribe.
No, the two children I'm talking about that detransitioned, their family physician wouldn't touch it, and they sent them to somebody else.
Well, there we go. Talk about the detransition. So let's say it is the family doctor, and it is all of those things. Would you say that this is reasonable treatment for most cases? Like, let's talk about 99% of cases. Would you say that this is a reasonable healthcare procedure by the way that we've explained it so far?
If it's a family doctor, I would err on the abundance of caution, and I let them wait till they're 18.
Well, I mean, if the doctor is prescribing it, though, like I'm trying to talk about, like, because the statement there should be no health care for trans children sounds like a policy, right? So the question is about you, Jacob, saying, okay, I want to make this way, is a very different question to making all families that agree with this position should be able to have this option, right?
Can I clarify a little bit
Yeah.
on my position?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so when I say no healthcare should be provided to transgender children, what I mean is like medical intervention, therapy, changing clothes, doing things outside of the scope of medication or surgery is what I'm talking about. So
Okay.
anything.
So part of what Josie's trying to say is that the doctors themselves err on the side of caution. Like, the whole medical system agrees with you, Jacob, that you should err on the side of caution, which is why it's a multidisciplinary field, the treatment of trans children. So usually it's not just your family doctor. They also see like at least one therapist, and they also see an endocrinologist, right? Like there are blood tests and years of therapy involved here. So for those doctors who are
right.
Well, yeah,
What's
because
that?
there's no brain scan. It's self-reporting is what he said. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
it is self-reporting, but like that's how we diagnose every single mental phenomenon. Like when you have depression or anxiety, or if you have schizophrenia, like there's no blood test that can show those things. So yeah, it's self-reporting. And it's like if they spend a period of years saying, yes, this is who I am, this is how I feel, this is what I want, the doctors are basically, the bar is incredibly high for you to get this care as a trans child anyway. Because yes, there are a bunch of cisgender doctors saying, but I'm not sure, let's give you another year, right? So the doctors are already erring on the side of caution. The doctors are already erring on the side of, we want to make sure nobody gets this care who doesn't need it, because the doctors don't want to get sued. You know, there are lawsuits right now of detransitioners suing their doctors, even when they were 32 years old when they got the procedure done. So yeah, like I think that it's interesting when lay people assert that they feel that their amount of caution is like better, you know, that the default position is, oh, they can wait until they're 18, but that's too late for a lot of trans
For a lot of
kids,
people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like,
I mean,
there are changes that they can't take away, and like a lot of psychological damage that they've incurred that they can't undo. That's irreversible, right? So, what is the answer to that? Like, why do we want to impose suffering on this group of people just in case someone might regret it? Like, just in case. Like, I just don't really get it.
I don't know why you would say that would induce suffering. Aren't the majority of trans people did not go through the hormone therapy? And
well, many of us don't have access to it, even though we really want it. That doesn't mean that we're just not getting it because we don't want it.
Yeah, that's true. And also a different, remember how we talked about, Jacob, that people discover things in their lives at different points in time. Some people discover, like myself, at 34 years old. Some people discover it when they're 20 years old. Some people discover it when they're 6. Right? There are different times that humans, in their understanding of themselves and their own gender identities, people figure it out, right? And most people are cis. Most people are just assigned the gender that they were born with, their sex, and boom, they move through life, and that's majority, 99% of the people, right? But there is a small segment of humans that isn't an easy answer. So because people decide at different points in time, there are different situations at different times on why this happens. So when you have a situation where somebody discovers that they're 6 or 7 or 8 years old, and you have these medical doctors, and it's a multidisciplinary thing, from psychology to family internal medicine to endocrinology, which are all very different profession disciplines, right? Those are all the things that are done. And then you have the family, the parents, as well as the minor that is like, yes, I want this. Why should the government intervene in that decision of doctor prescribed healthcare that a family has been intimately living with for years?
I would say because kids can't consent.
But that's your opinion.
So do you think that a footballer should not get surgery? Like, do you think that a kid who's gotten, like, do you think that kids cannot consent to getting, like, their ears pierced? Like, where is the line here?
Cancer treatment?
It's in a whole different universe.
It's not though. Really, it's about body autonomy. It's about their choices about their life permanently. Do you think that kids should be able to consent to doing ballet because it permanently fucks up your bones? Like, kids who start ballet and gymnastics when they're young, they are permanently different. Like, doctors can look at you 40 years later and oh yeah, you were a dancer, huh? Like, why do you think that's fundamentally different in some way?
Because that has been all around shown to have positive benefits throughout.
So has transition.
Trans care has been shown positive benefits. But Jacob, let me just say this. The reason we bring up the football player, the kid with cancer, the appendicitis, person getting treatment for ADHD medications or depression, and trans care all in the same category, because it's all doctor prescribed. Do you understand? It's all doctor prescribed professional advice that doctors are giving to families. Evidence-based clinical care, right? So Jacob, that's why it's strange and weird to single out one thing that is trans care and say this one sliver, it's not okay in medicine, when the rest of the medical community disagrees and says, no, that is medicine and this is doctor prescribed. That's why I believe that we should, in this country, have the freedom to be able to listen to our doctors' professional clinical advice to provide the healthcare that we are prescribed. I think we get into dangerous territory when we have politicians come in and say, no, that procedure is allowed, but this procedure isn't, right? Because now we are messing with the profession, which is medicine. And we know from the clinician. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you say to the notion that they started doing this before that they had this multi-year data? they started doing.
They've been
these
doing this since the
transitions.
1920s, even more so since beginning of like we've had trans people in existence since the beginning of human civilization, right? It's not a new phenomenon for people to be trans. The fact of the matter is, guess what? I was a young person once as a trans person, right? Like I'm a trans woman, discovered it at 34 years old, but I used to be a young person, right? And so in reality, it's like when we have the human experience and we're able to discover through medicine and understanding of clinicians and all of this work that we realize that some people, like I said, Jacob, right? Some people figure out when they're 6 years old and some people figure out when they're 75, 82 years old, right? Like it's just a different journey that we all take as humans. So most people probably will discover it in their 20s. Some people will discover it when they're young. Some people will discover it when they're a teenager. And what we got to do is make sure that medical science and doctors are there to capture and help people when they come about, right? And that's the reality. We should have the freedom, families should have the freedom to seek medical care for their children when they seem to be distressed. And somebody who has gender dysphoria and is not getting treated is suffering a form of distress. I would be up in arms, and I'm sure you would be up in arms if somebody was like, you know what, this specific form of child cancer is should not, we shouldn't risk giving them chemotherapy. We should just let them live for cancer and frail until the age of 18 when their body can take it better. You would probably be like, what are you talking about? Like other kids have survived this. Why are we having this discussion, right? It would be very strange. Wouldn't you think that would be strange?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
It's the same thing with
different
trans
thing
care.
for me.
No, well, for you it's a different thing, but for medical doctors it's not, right? And the medical profession and medical clinicians, they all know that this is healthcare across the board. And to have politicians come in and say this is allowed and this isn't allowed is affecting the freedom of families to get the doctor prescribed healthcare that they should be free to be able to have.
Have you heard of the Cass report from the UK?
Yeah, it's been widely discredited because it was made by specifically anti-trans people who refused to look at any data that counteracted their views. It's being widely discredited. There are so many people who have gone over it in thorough detail.
Jacob, I want you to think about it. Sweden has their own their protocols as well. Jacob, it seems now that you're just kind of reaching, right? And right now I think it's best if we and we have data too, and we show that, you know, with the WPATH and clinicians and the just the sheer satisfaction of trans people's lives, we are able to know that trans people do not normally regret it. And if we used regret as a form, we would stop doing nose jobs, we'd stop doing nose surgeries, we'd even stop doing heart surgeries, because people who have cardiac surgery also regret it in a lot of cases too. In fact, trans regret rate is actually one of the lowest regret rates of any type of surgery in the world, sitting at 1%, when on average surgeries across the board is about 20%. Right. So we have to look at the thing that helps the most amount of people. And right now, what we know is what helps the most amount of people is going through medical, clinical, prescribed healthcare by physicians that say this is helpful, and it's up to the parents and the patients to agree and consent to those things, so then they can live their lives in an effective way. And it's tragic if some people go through the system and realize that they made a mistake, but overall 99% of those people are not saying that. So that's what we have to do as society in all medical care. Why make an exception just for trans care?
Do you know who Kristen Beck is?
Yeah, I'm a trans veteran too. Right. And I'm completely fine. It doesn't matter, like a Navy SEAL who decided to say, oh, I regret my transition. She was already an adult when she already served an entire illustrious Navy SEAL career, and then decided to say I'm trans, and then decided that she's not. That's an adult, right? We're not talking about that.
Yeah, but it's not that she was an adult. Is that whenever she came out as a transitioner, she was bullied. She got death threats, etc., etc. There's another one, McKinnon, Doctor
Yeah, that's why she
McKinnon.
detransitioned, though.
McKinnon.
She
Do what?
detransitioned because of the death threats. Then, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, she detransitioned and she tried to talk about it in the community, and she got death threats because of it. And that's why I believe that the
Well, I
rate
don't
is only
condone death
1%.
threats. I don't condone death threats, and neither does most people in the trans community. I think a lot of people have a lot of sympathy for detransitioners because gender dysphoria sucks. And it sucks to live a body that isn't congruent with yourself. So if somebody is cis and then they transition and they're still cis, yeah, I feel sympathy for them because they're living with gender dysphoria. So a person who's detransitioned is living with gender dysphoria, and we want them to get the treatment to go back to something that makes them more comfortable in their bodies. I would say
But
that
yeah,
99% of the trans community agrees with that.
yeah, and my point was just that I don't believe it's 1% at all. I believe that it's much, much, much higher because they
Well,
get death
that's
threats and
incorrect, though.
ostracized from the
Do you
community.
think that,
And
hold
that
on,
was just my
like,
point.
first of all, Jacob, you're
I think it's
wrong.
more like 20.
The data
Huh?
shows overwhelmingly that trans people do not have regret. When they get surgery, when they do hormones, we don't have a huge amount of regret. It's like objectively the case. Do you genuinely think that detrans people get more death threats than trans people? Do you genuinely think that there is a stronger social stigma against being detrans than there is for being trans? Like, sometimes you just have to deal with the fact that things suck and like be yourself anyway. But we're having a meandering conversation here, and we're gonna have to reel it in pretty quickly because we need to take a couple more calls before we wrap up. But I encourage you to think about the things that we've said specifically about children and their right to access to healthcare. And you're more than welcome to call back later in the month. I know I'll be back later in the month. But like, I want to try to keep things focused as much as possible in the future calls because
and we have spent a lot
we're
of
starting to
time
get
with
off
you,
the rails
Jacob.
here.
Yeah, but I appreciate your call, and I appreciate you letting this conversation be respectful. Just take a thought about families taking, doctor prescribed healthcare, and really deeply think about like personal freedoms and families' freedoms, and think about why we should allow doctors to produce that type of care and for people to consent to them. I think is probably a better conversation to think about for a while. But we really appreciate the call, and definitely call back later if we want to continue this conversation.
Can I ask one question really quick, and that's it?
You'll be very quick because I gotta go soon.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. Just one question. If somebody identifies as trans and then they detransition like later in 2 years, are they trans for that two-year period, or were they never trans?
I mean, it really doesn't matter so much, other than like at the time they were trans and then they weren't trans.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
it's like kind
Or
of
they
how it
thought
goes.
they
It's
were
like,
and then they weren't. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It just is what it
That's
is
all I want to know.
sometimes. Yeah,
Okay, that's
absolutely.
the only question. Thank y'all for being polite. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks
We
to you.
appreciate you.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope that Jacob thinks about some of the conversations, and about
Calls
it's just
back.
about
Yeah.
freedom to access to care. It's just about freedom to access to care, like, and it is weird for like this specific segment of medicine being scrutinized at this level when other things in medicine are just completely ignored, right? Like it's just weird. I'm gonna use that word. It's just weird.
Yep. It's transphobia, but
all
yeah.
right. So we're gonna rapid fire these calls. Sorry, callers. We're gonna try to go through this. I do got a trans delegate call that I have to take after this, so we are gonna rapid fire. Let's go. Let's start with James from Indiana. I'm gonna be in your state in 2 weeks. How are you? No, I'm gonna be in
I'm
Illinois.
doing
Sorry,
good.
not Indiana.
Second time talking to you, Josie.
Yes, nice to hear from you. How are you? What would you like to talk about?
So I wanted you and Les's opinion on whether or not we should or could separate the art from the artist when the author turns out to be bigoted. The author that brings this to my mind is
Joanne.
Tolkien. Not Tolkien. It's Harry Potter.
J.K. Rowling, right? Yeah, I call her
Rowling, yeah.
Joanne. Yeah, you know,
Oh,
and she respects
She
trans
hates
people.
it.
I'll call her JK. She hates it when we
Yeah.
call her Joanne. So you know, so
Oh, good to know.
yeah.
The Sorcerer's Stone was the first book I ever read. It encouraged me to read Tolkien stuff. That's why Tolkien was stuck in my head. So it really gave me my love for literature.
Of course.
And it really sucks that like some people that bring these like very transformative things into the world have such disgusting views. And
Yeah.
I don't know. My personal approach to it, I've decided that I'm not going to consume any new Harry Potter media. But I take that as my own choice. The same reason why I don't eat at Chick-fil-A, but I don't look down at people that do eat at Chick-fil-A. Like, I don't know. But it boggled my mind. This happened a year ago. My now ex-wife looked at me and said, "Hey, are we avoiding buying the new Harry Potter game?" And at the time she asked that question, our trans friend was in the room, and I'm like, why are you asking the cis-het white guy what his opinion is on this? Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'd say
I've
it's really
seen
difficult.
arguments
Like,
about, yeah.
lots of
Sorry, go
people.
ahead.
I think that you're correct. That I think that the right thing to do is to not give her money because she spends that money lobbying against trans rights in the UK, where now trans youth do not have any access to trans-related healthcare at all because of the cast review and like a bunch of motivated transphobia. Like, can you still personally find enjoyment, listening to the original audiobooks or reading your original books? Like, I don't think that that's necessarily a crime against humanity or something. But it's difficult when the author is alive and is still inserting themselves constantly into the narrative. Like, it's almost impossible to do Death of the Author with J.K. Rowling because she's still saying stuff. Well, I mean, as of a few years ago, she's kind of stopped now adding more
She's gotten
canon.
worse.
She's
She's not
only
adding canon.
she's only transphobia now. Yeah, that's all she's got now. She used to be like, by the way, wizards used to shit themselves and then cast a spell to make it go away. So yeah, it's like pretty much impossible with someone like her to completely divorce her work from herself. And like, honestly, if you go back and you reread it anyway, it's mean and mean-spirited and bullying and it's bad anyway. It was just massively popularized because she had like family wealth that was able to go into the publishing and like marketing of her book. But it was not actually that transformative. It was actually pretty reductive. Like if you look at other children's media that was already around at that time. So yeah, it's like a bummer that it was so culturally significant for so many people, but also grow up with better books.
Yeah, James, there's one thing that is very clear. It's like it's what we do. We get lost in media, right? Especially when we're young and we're kids, right? It's just like, oh, I'm gonna glom on to like this media and like it's like Goosebumps or something. And then now you go watch Goosebumps now and you're just like, what? Why did I like this? This is so lame, right? And I think that happens a lot. And I think that when you look at the Harry Potter media, you're like, oh wow, this is not so inspired like I thought it did. But what you can say is like, hey, at least it got me to read good literature like Tolkien, and now you have a strong grasp and foundation of fantasy, right? Like, those doorways are incredibly important, right? Like Goosebumps got me to be a reader, right? I also used to read Animorphs, which were also horrible writing, right? But I used to
love
watch
them.
it. I used to read. I know, I love them. But I bet you, Lux, if you read the Animorphs now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, what was I
It would be
sitting in
cringe.
class
Yeah.
reading? It would be incredibly cringe, right? So I think as young people, we do that, and we like really like herald this thing, and like, because when you're a kid, like your imagination fills in the blanks, right? It's just like everything is so fantastic, incredible, and then you read it as an adult, and you're like, no, I know what good art is. And
Yep.
then I need the blanks filled in now. Thank you. So yeah. So James, I think that it's an important conversation, and honestly, I do recommend not supporting her work. And I think honestly, what's going to end up happening is she's going to just sell the property. At least we can hope she does. And then we just get our love back for the genre. Right, because that's what I would say is the most disappointing, is like every time I see wizarding genre, I'm just like, oh, why is it ruined? Right. And if something came out about Tolkien, you would be like, no, my fantasy, like that would be
I would be heartbroken.
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely
because, like,
heartbroken.
so many hours of my life, going through the hills as an elf, and just like that is so formative in my adult life now. But I think that it's a good conversation, and I think it's important to let people know. I had a cousin or I have a cousin whose girlfriend was really into Harry Potter, like really into it. She just came back from Harry Potter Land or World, whatever it is, and she came to our house, and she had like a backpack and everything, and then she saw my partner's collection on our bookshelf of Harry Potter, and there's a trans heart covering her name, because she also loved the series when she was growing up too. And she put a trans sticker heart over the names of J.K. Rowling, because she's my girlfriend and she's supporting me, right? And so she was like, why did you cover J.K. Rowling's name with a bunch of stickers like that? And we're just like, oh, honey, we have bad news. like we have to, and then
this is going to be away.
Yeah. And she literally got teary-eyed and was heartbroken, because she was like, oh my God, I had no idea. All I did was just opened up the Twitter and just handed her and just read a couple weeks of this. And she literally started to cry and was like, I'm so sorry, I had no idea, because she was like legitimately happy. And then she realized, oh wait, this isn't okay. Like I'm here with my trans, friend. And we're just like, yeah, it's okay. We're not mad at you for liking the stuff, but it's important to know who you're supporting. Right. So yeah, it's a hard
Know where
one,
the
James.
money's going.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Like so many people across the world, so many trans and queer people in particular read about a boy that lived under the stairs, isolated away from the world, literally living in a closet and going and escaping to a magical world where they could be free who they were, is literally the queer and trans allegory. And then when we find out the person who wrote that just got that by accident, is just the most disgusting thing ever. It's like, what? How did you miss this? It's okay. She's losing money like crazy. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, she doesn't make. Yeah, she doesn't
well,
make money.
I know
on this
you got to rush.
Yes, I do.
I know you got to go, but I have
James.
a 2-minute story that I think you would enjoy.
Okay, make it quick.
I was talking to my 6-year-old nephew, and he looks at me and he says, James, did you know that some girls have vulvas and some girls have penises, and that's okay?
Score.
Yes, my heart. It's so beautiful.
So, kid, you are smarter than a large subset of the nation right now.
Yeah.
I love that boy. I love him
Kids
so
are
much.
okay.
Oh,
That's
oh
awesome.
my God, they really are. Oh, it makes me so happy. Ah, thank you, James, for sharing that. You made my night.
Absolutely. Well, I'll let you get to the next
Yeah.
one.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great night. All right. So we're just rapid firing right now. I believe the name is Maya. If I'm
Maya,
mispronouncing that, I
yeah.
apologize. Yes. How are
No, you
you?
got it
And what would
right.
you like to talk about? Okay, great.
Um, I'm all right. I'm a little scatterbrained because I've been listening this whole time, and I've just been coming up with new questions the whole time,
Oh,
and it's really hard to pick just one. But
yeah, for
um,
sure.
my main one is uh, is it it might be kind of too general. If it is, let me know. But how does poverty affect our community, and are we biased against in the legal system typically?
Yes, I have data to support everything. So I ran the
Oh,
US Trans Survey, and you should look at the US Trans Survey data. The new report is soon
okay.
coming from 2022, but the Trans Survey in 2015, we're actually coming out with a civic engagement report in like a week, next week.
Oh,
But one third, it's roughly one third. You can actually go to the website right now. Of the trans population actually has
okay.
lived in poverty or been houseless. Like the fact of the matter is that poverty and being houseless and being unemployed, we are highly representative in our community of having these issues, and it affects us in very deep, significant ways. If you're unhoused, you're
Yeah,
more likely to be criminalized, right? Like in certain cities, for
yeah,
example, like in San Diego, like you can't even be homeless on the streets. In California, they're trying to like move homeless out of the state. Like it is incredibly difficult when you're in poverty. You
yeah,
don't have access to resources, so it affects us in a very, very deep way. And a lot of trans people have chosen families, so we kind of live together and we kind of go and suffer together in a lot of this. So it affects all of us
yeah,
and our friends as well. It's very rare to find a trans person that doesn't know a trans person who's struggling. Like
mm,
I don't know any trans people. Very few trans people I know don't know somebody who's struggling. That's trans
I
themselves.
definitely don't.
Um,
Well, I do.
yeah, and yeah, of course of course. Like, and so the legal
Yeah,
system is also against us because there's barriers. For example, IDs. Getting IDs can be incredibly difficult. In fact, it's one third of the trans population don't have IDs that don't match their gender identity or presentation. So therefore, they don't have
yeah,
access to things that you need an ID for, like a rental application, or like or
yeah,
just trying to get like you know alcohol, whatever, right? Not having an ID,
yeah,
even the vote in some states can be incredibly difficult. So legally, we have a lot of barriers as well. And the law system is not kind to us in the state of Florida. They are currently trying to say if you are arrested as a trans woman, they're mandated to buzz your head, right? Before you just to go to
oh,
jail, right? So like
horrible.
there are so many, yeah, it's absolutely horrible. So there is a lot of things that are very against trans people, and we have an incredible amount of barriers that we have to overcome just to live in the United States. Sorry to be such a bummer.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Honestly, I'm not exactly surprised. You know, I've done my research myself. Just you know, I'll definitely look at those data points. As I'm doing more research. But like,
Yeah.
do you you know, do you think that there is more hope in the future, especially considering the way things are going recently, like very recently?
I say yes, but
It
not
depends
for
on where you
everybody.
live. Yep.
Exactly. It's about zip
Like,
code.
even if
And
Harris wins, I'm still moving out of Kansas because holy shit, I'm tired of having my rights whittled away at. So yeah, unfortunately, I think it
yeah.
is
Free.
super dependent on your zip
Oh
code.
my goodness.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like there are certain things that would be a huge fix, like passing the Equality Act, right? But in order to pass the Equality Act, we have to end the filibuster in the Senate, right? Because we will never be able to pass it with the 60-person majority with the way that the government is currently set up. So you would actually have to end the filibuster so then you can get enough votes to pass the Equality Act, for example. And then you also have Republican representatives going after Title IX, right? You have a lot of different things that are always going after us nationally. So unfortunately, it's about where you live, where things are either better, much better, or things are sliding to worse. So it's a really unfortunate situation.
I mean, about Title IX, that is a pretty big stride forward that we made recently. I think so.
I agree.
Yeah. I just think I was really happy when I read about it, to be honest. And I really hope that it doesn't get taken away from us. You know.
That's why this election matters a lot. This election matters a whole of a lot. Like if we get that, when we're going to be able to protect Title IX and even strengthen it. And that's incredibly important for us to do that. And for those of you listening, Title IX gives us protections around sex and gender, especially in schools and spaces and homeless shelters and things of that nature. So it's incredibly important because it effectively tries to end sex discrimination and gender discrimination across the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one last thing. This is like, you mentioned this like an hour and a half ago, and I haven't gotten my mind off of it. You mentioned this movie called, it's like something From the Eyes.
Oh, I saw the TV Glow.
The TV
it's
Glow.
Called.
I saw the TV Glow. Okay, I was right off.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, it's definitely
that sounded
worth watching.
really cool.
It is.
Apparently,
really
it's
good.
quite emotionally taxing, so be prepared to not have a good time when you watch it. I haven't seen it, but that's what I've heard. You might cry.
It crawls into your head and it sticks there for a while. That's what I liked about it. But I like good art. I like good art.
Oh, believe me, I do too. I'm a poet by nature. So.
Yeah. Oh, then you're gonna love it. Then your poetry mind is gonna eat that up.
Oh my goodness! I'm so excited now.
Good.
As my parting gift, have you guys heard of the film? Why am I blanking on the title now? Paris is Burning. It's from the early 90s. Have you seen it?
Yeah. Yes, it's about New York ballroom culture. Yeah. If you like that, you should definitely watch Pose.
Watch what?
Pose. Pose. Yep. It's about ballroom culture. A lot of that show gets its inspiration from Paris is Burning.
Oh man. Okay, well, really I guess I don't have any parting gift for you guys.
Yes.
I've already heard of it, but
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. I appreciate you. Have a great night.
It was really
right.
It was you too.
All right, bye-bye. Rapid fire, we can finish. All right, and our good friend
I don't know if we
Pip,
have time for you to do super chats and everything.
We're gonna do it.
Are you sure?
Well, we're gonna do it. Yeah, I'm gonna send them a message saying that I'm gonna be late. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
See what I do for everybody? You see what I do for all of you? You better love this. You better love this. Hey Pip, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing well. I'll get straight to the point.
Yes.
I commonly see the most common transphobic argument you're going to see is the reasoning error, including biological determinism. It's by the people who always seem to insist that a person's quote-unquote biology trumps everything, and more often than not, this is like high school level biology, or even less than that. It is kindergarten logic. But I also was inspired to make this call by a conversation that was had on Skep Talk a couple of weeks back with Erika Gibbon. And this is no slight against her. This is just an observation in that she and the other co-host, whose name I don't remember, went back and forth a fair bit with this transphobe who was repeatedly pushing this biological determinism, and the constant response to that was sex and gender are different things. Even if they do accept that gender exists to begin with, they're still not acknowledging it because it's internal, because it's attached to our sense of self, our sense of identity. And because it's mental and not something you can visually see, they are always taking what you can visually see and sometimes what they guess you can visually see over that. So how do we, really put the pressure on biological determinism to show that no, our physical bodies are not the defining point of who we are in totality?
An excellent and difficult question, because ultimately at the end of the day, the question is, how do you get a transphobe to stop shifting the goalposts? Like, they're gonna pick something else, whether it's the chromosomes or the gametes or whatever. Like, they're always gonna retreat Mott and Bailey style to some more defensible position. But my thing is, like, I don't really like how much we've hammered on in the past, like, oh, there's a difference between sex and gender. I mean, yeah, you can say there's a difference between sex and like the entire cultural concept of gender or whatever. But like, what is the brain if not part of your biology? Like, there is something biological to it, obviously, if for no other reason than like, I biologically prefer chocolate over vanilla. I'm gonna be upset if you serve me sherbet. Like, I don't know. That's kind of my thing, is just like, what is the brain if not something biological? That is clearly where it's coming from. It's neurobiology. It's like neuroscience. I know that is not necessarily popular because some people go into this whole, there are male and female brains, and that's not what I mean to imply, because there's not really strong data with that. But it's coming from somewhere in there, even if we can't like scan it and look at it.
Yeah, and the way that, and I'm always going, like, for me, it's like, you outvote them. You don't care. You beat them in the ballot box, and you beat them on the votes, and that's how you beat their bad ideas. And then they may shift to something that's not so disgusting. But if you're going with the conversation and the hypothetical of trying to convert somebody away from bioessentialism, essentially you have to, essentially at the end of the day, you are trying to prove something that we can all see isn't true. Like, for example, if you say bioessentialism is the way that makes sense and is the way things are, then trans people wouldn't exist, right? The existence of trans people already like disproves bioessentialism. Because if we're strictly bioessentialists and say bioessentialism is the only way that we can live and structure our lives, show me the proof of that. Because the fact that trans people exist disproves the fact that bioessentialism is the way of life, right? And you're talking about millions of people across the world who are trans, that disprove the fact that you need to have a penis to be a man, or you need to have a vagina to have a woman, to be a woman, right? Or that non-binary people are valid and walking around in society, right? Like, the reality of the world almost disproves bioessentialism, right? And so it's a hard argument, like, but they're standing on such a a they're standing on such a point that is like impossible to prove that they're right on, and they're not creating any ground, and they're just being stubborn. So if they say you must have a penis to be a man and you must have a vagina to be a woman and that's the only thing that exists, is like, okay, cool story. What about that trans woman over there living her best life? Right? Like, it's like it doesn't speak to the reality of the world. Like, somebody can go and just be screaming that the sky is never cloudy, and then a cloudy day rolls around and they're like, well, this is, the sun's in my eyes, I can't really see. Like, it's just like, get out of here. Like, the fact of the matter is sometimes it's cloudy, right? And sometimes you don't need to have a penis to be a man, right? And to me is kind of where you have a really good place to start in a conversation like that, because you're just going to make them seem obstinate. You're going to make them sound weird. It's like, okay, like, you're just like making this claim over and over. It's not intellectually honest. You're not leaving any ground for any type of disbelief. And somebody who's going to stand obstinately and say a penis man, vagina woman, it's like, okay, what else are you adding to the conversation? Right? Like that's where I would be in that world. But
yeah,
I say
and
beat
what
them in the
I would add, sorry, and what I would add to that is that there is so much of our lives that are defined by our brains, by our lived experiences. We are not just, sacks of meat running around. We are literally brains piloting a mech suit of flesh and bone. The brain is the center of the person, and as such, it's our brains who define who we are as people. And because woman is a class of person, a type of person in both the physical and the social, respect, then it is perfectly justifiable for someone to be a woman regardless of what their biology is. Because despite what, transphobes may say about, they're just mentally ill and the like, is that dysphoria is the mental illness because it's interfering with our lives. The entire point of mental illness is that it is making our lives harder due to a specific, aspect of our irregulated moods. And if transitioning is what is helping that, is what is actually, serving to cure that mental illness, being the person that you, want to be, then clearly transitioning is the way to cure the mental health problem. And that being trans itself is not an issue of mental health.
Yeah.
I could go on, but you think
Pip.
you get the point by now.
Yeah. Yes. And honestly, you can use their framing in a pinch, like mental illness, but really it's just a mental condition. And, and people want to treat mental conditions. And, so if you want to use their framing because that's the only thing they'll listen to, then you can use that and kind of catch them in a catch-22 in that realm of like, don't you want to treat people? Like, then you can go that route. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, Pip, I gotta run. So
no worries.
thanks for calling in as always. Yes, always. Bye. All right, let's rapid fire Aron. Aron, how are you? And sorry, I am like on a speed run right now. So
I can make this so quick. I can make this so quick. Okay, my question is, how long is it possible to safely bind for several years for a 15-year-old? Not tight, like I followed the instructions on the website when I get them for them. So it's not real tight, but they're too young to actually do anything more than bind. So is this safe?
Yeah. So I would say, depending on their age, you probably
15.
want to 15. Okay. So at that age, we're still growing actively. I would say you probably want to check in every couple of months and check their measurements, because if they're growing, we might need to replace the binder more often Of course, it's like having a young kid with shoes. You're buying shoes constantly for them.
Right.
That's like the main concern. As far as like making sure that there's no, bruising of the ribs, that there's no malformation of the ribs. Making sure that kiddo is only wearing it for the certain, 8 hours of the day that they're at school, not wearing it going swimming and stuff like that.
That's tough. I mean, that's a little tough because, they don't want to take it off when they go out with their friends after school and things like that.
Sure.
So,
if there's a break, I think that would be good. Like if you take a break in the middle of the day, like if they come home and then they go out with the friends, like if they take a break and then there's only another couple of hours, that's probably better. Or if it's possible for them to take a break, like in the bathroom at lunch hour or something in the middle of the day. We just want to make sure that there's like, enough space to breathe, basically. Yeah, taking breaks. And obviously, it's probably not like they're going out with their friends every single day anyway. But mainly, we want to not sleep in it. Like, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that doesn't happen for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get checkups, right? Have the doctor come and like get checkups to, like kind of poke and like see the pressure points, making sure there's not like weird inflammation and pain.
Yeah, there should be no
important
pain.
Yeah, no pain at all. So if they're like sore, then there's probably problems. So it's kind of like just making sure that they're communicating, and making sure that they know they're doing this for their health, is really, really
right.
yeah. Because you
Well,
can even say yeah, I was gonna say you can even say like, do you want to have back problems for the rest of your life? Like you can just be honest.
Well, they're also on the spectrum, so being uncomfortable isn't something that they are usually very quiet about. So I'm less worried that they're gonna be they're gonna be making themselves uncomfortable. But tactile issues not so fun with them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But yeah, awesome. Well, thank you.
That's
Sorry
all
that
I needed to know. Thank you so much. No, I appreciate you taking me real quick.
Of course, absolutely. All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye. All right, that was great. All right, let's get to the super chats. And I see what you're doing, chat. You're adding super chats to see you're just milking this time with me. All right. I see you. I see you. All right. $5 from William Mattis. Hey, you two, can I get your best pose?
That's the awkward teenager is having a photo taken of them and is not happy about it moment. Oh, gosh. 50 pounds, I think that's what that symbol is, from Jackie Greenland. Thank you. That is very generous. I don't think that Jackie's here right now because she said, can't watch live again as I'm stuck in the longest ever CBP queue at O'Hare, but haven't said hi for weeks. So have some money. Oh, and we had riots back home, but they're nowhere near as bad as Twitter would have you believe. I heard that a lot of anti-racist activists came out, but the racist people did kind of burn a library a little bit. So yeah, it was wild for a minute there.
Yeah. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. Love these human moments. I'm headed for Galveston from Austin tomorrow for Pirate Poets Weekend, a woman poetry retreat. Ooh, that sounds fun. Have a great time. I know.
$10 from Tubian323 says, I liked the way the Connors dealt with trans character. After the episode where you find out that Darlene's boss is trans, they never mention it again because it's nobody's business. I missed that one, but that sounds like good rep.
That sounds awesome. $5 from William Mattis. Question, how do you get my milkshakes to bring all the boys to the yard? You have to make some pretty damn good milkshakes. You should try vegan kind because then you bring in a whole new audience.
True. Another $5 from William Mattis says, Hola, Josie, Luxander, estoy bien, ¿cómo estás? It's the end of the show, so I think we're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I get to talk to some really awesome trans people from all over the country.
Heck yeah.
$5 from East JL. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Maybe we will one day find out that J.K. Rowling really stands for just kidding. would be the world's unfunniest joke. True.
Yeah, truly the world's unfunniest joke. God.
Yeah.
Another $5 super chat. Thank you from William Mattis says, Rowling became Umbridge. Umbridge is the worst villain. Everyone knows an Umbridge. Umbridge is lawful evil. Yeah, I love how universally hated Professor Umbridge is. It's great.
Yeah, it's super great. Super perfect. All right, $10 from David Hexor. This is a super chat. Yes, it is. It's a super chat that identifies as a super chat.
$10 from Aliashana Silverbow says that this is also a super chat.
Ooh, a lot of self-identifying super chats. $9.99 from Geminic06. This is a super chat. Oh, I love the trend. Spartan kicks previous super chats into the pit. Okay, yeah, it is a bigger super chat, and I think that's how it works.
David Haxor with a 1234 Canadian says, no, this is a super chat. Overwhelming evidence.
Overwhelming. How much bigger are these gonna get? $9.99 from Brian Pooh KC. And this is yet another super chat. It's like a little quiet one. I love it. Like, I'm a super chat too.
$5 from Rogue Show. Thank you says, is this a super chat? I think so. It seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's a tiny one, but it's a good one. $20 from Secular Felinist. That's no moon. It's a super chat. That is a quite large super chat. Easily confused for a moon.
So true. I think this is 20 Australian maybe from Darren McAuliffe. Says, I'm convinced that Voldemort was intended to be the hero and no one realized. Like, yeah, she was just so bad at writing that, yeah. Oh man, that's funny.
I mean, if you squint right, like the wizards are kind of the ones that are enslaving the goblins and like
they're a little bit racist, just a little bit.
And they like genocide, they like ostracize those magical creatures to the woods, so they didn't get to have their weapons either. Oof.
Rough.
Maybe Voldemort is just unknown hero. $20 from Space Daddy. Just missed the show. Thank you for all the things you do. I'll watch tomorrow when I get to work. Also been loving the non-binary rep, of course.
Represent.
Like 1/3 of our community. $5. $5 from Chan Vendor. Keep up the great work. I'm starting a new job soon, but it's for the federal government, so makes the election important to me. Being a trans woman, well, it's an important job. I'm glad you're doing it.
Yep.
Wow, we did it. We did it.
You're only like 3 minutes late.
We got
there's more.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. This is a normal chat with delusions of grandeur. Okay. All right. I see you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for having us today. And I think I'm back next week. Are you back next week?
I don't think I'm back until like the third week.
Okay, I'm not going to be here the week after the next. But I think
so. I'm not going to see you until like the end of the month. Cringe.
Oh no, that's awful. How am I gonna last the month? I'm gonna be too stressed out with DNC. Oh my gosh.
True. Yeah, you'll be distracted enough.
Yeah, that's fair. And if you want to join the Trans Folks for Harris Call, I put the link on where to sign up. Please do that, and make sure you join all the other shows on the line to go and check us out, because we'll be there. At least some of us will. I won't be.
Nope.
Maybe I will. That happens. Okay, here we go. I can never do this right. There.
Join Patreon.
No.
Do it.
Join Patreon. There's a list. You want to be on that list.